Jordan from Ohio for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would slightly disagree with the statement, Mr. Smith. What our democracy depends on is the First Amendment. Not necessarily journalism is fine, it's all part of it as long as they're actually adhering to the First Amendment. Mr. Travis, at the end of your statement, you said, I'm a First Amendment absolutist, and I believe cancel culture intertwined with identity politics is the greatest threat to our country. I could not agree more. Do you have a functioning First Amendment when only one side's allowed to talk? Do you have free speech when big tech, big media, and big government decides what can be said and what can be seen?
No, you don't.
Not at all.
Not at all. And I think that is the major issue that our country is facing today.
Yeah, more important than this broad concept of journalism, which I'm all for, it's the First Amendment, the right to speak and to speak in a political nature and not be censored for speaking out in a political fashion. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Some of our colleagues have been railing about what they call cancel culture. I just made a quick list off the top of my head of some people that right-wing conservatives have tried to censure or cancel privately or publicly or defund or boycott. Here's some of them. Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who they tried to kick off of her chairmanship of the House Republican Conference. Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Senator Richard Burr, any of the 17 Republican members of Congress who voted to impeach and convict Donald Trump for inciting violent insurrection against the Union. ABC, Acorn, TV host Samantha Bee, Campbell's Soup, the Dixie Chicks, New York Times reporter Sopan Deb, comedian Kathy Griffin, Guinness, Hallmark, CNN commentator Mark Lamont Hill, Nike, Pepsi, the New York Times, the words climate change and science-based in numerous government agencies and documents, Starbucks, Target, and on and on and on. So do you find that the cancel culture is limited to one side of the political spectrum, or do you think there's a lot of right-wing cancel culture out there which really got this whole, all the engines of censorship revved up?
Congressman, I come at this, again, representing the people creating quality journalism. And the best answers for all of this is to have the most amount of good information, good journalism out there possible. And we currently have a system that devalues that content and constrains our capacity to deliver good information. And the fifth answer is a diversity of journalism in the system.
Okay. Thank you.
If there's anything that Republicans should have learned at Trump's second impeachment trial, it's that you really don't want to position yourself against Jamie Raskin, the lawmaker responsible for helping arrive at the most bipartisan vote to convict in an impeachment trial in the history of this country, even if they didn't reach the 2/3 threshold required. But especially not when it's just Jim Jordan's D-list Newsmax rants about cancel culture. So that we're clear, despite Republican attempts to frame this as some unconstitutional attack on the First Amendment, when there's beef with something someone said, that's not government-sponsored communist-style silence, it is quite literally the free market. Consumers calling for boycotts of brands that finance hate speech, for example, is capitalism. It's allowing the free market, the consumers, to have a say in what people should and shouldn't buy. So I find it pretty ironic that Republicans wail about the dangers of any political or economic system that isn't capitalism, and yet they seem outright horrified of capitalism the moment it doesn't unconditionally benefit them. And getting more specific here, with regard to this hearing, Jim Jordan rails against this idea that conservatives are being silenced online, which is clearly a reference to a number of Republican officials having their accounts suspended. But here's the thing, this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's not like the Twitter gods just woke up one day and decided to suspend Donald Trump's account or Mike Lindell's account or a number of other accounts just because they're conservative. Those people use that platform to foment violence, to push the big lie that the election was stolen, a lie that directly led to an insurrection at the Capitol. You'd think that might be of some importance in a discussion about accounts being suspended. You think that might come up at least once. These people are talking about silencing voices as if it popped up out of nowhere. It isn't some arbitrary decision, it was the direct result of their behavior. And to think that the Republican Party actually brands itself the party of personal responsibility. Consider too, Twitter and YouTube and Facebook are private companies. They have terms of service that you have to follow. No one is entitled to these platforms. So when Trump and the rest of his lying mouthpieces get kicked off of certain platforms for breaking the terms of service that they themselves agreed to, the issue isn't the company companies. The issue is the fact that they broke the rules that everyone else has to abide by. This isn't cancel culture, it's not censorship, it's not erasure, it is accountability. But with all of that said, amid all of the complaining about cancel culture, it is Republicans who've been doing it for years. Jamie Raskin read out an entire list of victims of Republican cancellation attempts. I mean, Christmas is basically synonymous with Republicans whining that Starbucks didn't put the entire nativity scene on their coffee cups. And yet we're supposed to pretend that Donald Trump is the victim for getting kicked off of Twitter after fomenting an insurrection at the Capitol that left half a dozen people dead? I mean, here's Donald Trump literally calling for NFL owners to get fired for not paying adequate fealty to the flag.
Luther and I, and everyone in this arena tonight, are unified by the same great American values. We're proud of our country. We respect our flag. Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired! Some owner's gonna do that. He's gonna say, that guy that disrespects our flag, he's fired.
Pretty sure Republicans have a word for that when you call on someone to be fired for not sharing the same political views as you. Any guesses? And that's not to mention the people who are still being quote-unquote canceled in conservative circles. What about Republicans who still vote against the Equal Rights Amendment for women? Are they not canceling women? What about those who still express opposition to LGBT rights? To those who don't believe in God, trans Americans? Republicans have been canceling people for years whose views they don't agree with. The only difference is that they don't have a monopoly over it anymore. Now the people who they've spent years vilifying are pushing back, and all Republicans can do is immediately cry that they're being canceled. So they'll show up on Fox News and whine, and OAN and whine, and Newsmax and whine, because while they were perfectly willing to dish out the cancellations for years, at the first whiff of pushback, they turn into full-blown babies and spend every waking hour throwing temper tantrums on national television. So instead of stomping their feet about being canceled, Republicans should consider why they're being canceled. Maybe it's not that you've got an R next to your name and so you're some martyr. Maybe it's because you helped spread the lie that the election was stolen, which led to a police officer getting bludgeoned to death at the Capitol on January 6th. Maybe it's because Newsmax and OAN and Fox have been caught lying on a relentless basis, and so Americans have the right, in a capitalist country, to direct their money away from brands that sponsor that content. The onus isn't on the rest of us to stop holding you accountable, it's on you to stop acting in a way that demands accountability. So the next time that Republicans wail about cancel culture, go ahead and point to Starbucks and Nike and the NFL and Keurig and Campbell's Soup and the Dixie Chicks and Pepsi and the New York Times and the rest of the targets of cancel culture on the right that were only okay because those boycotts aligned with their own political agenda. They might like to pretend they're not hypocrites, but that doesn't change the fact that they are. To see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the notification bell. And please subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I not only break down the biggest stories of the week, but I also interview major players in the world of politics, including Vice President Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Katie Porter, Pete Buttigieg, Cory Booker, Jamie Raskin, and many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.